What if everything you believed about what happens after death was incomplete? What if a saint who lived less than 200 years ago was actually taken beyond the veil, and came back with details so vivid, so specific, that they would permanently change the way you live today? That's exactly what we're going to walk through right now, and by the time this is done, I promise you, eternity won't feel distant anymore. It will feel like the next room. Saint John Bosco wasn't the kind of man who dealt in vague spiritual feelings. He was a priest who built schools, rescued thousands of street kids from the gutters of 19th century Turin, and ran one of the most effective youth ministries the church has ever seen. But beneath all of that extraordinary practical work was something few people talk about: a series of prophetic dreams so precise, so loaded with theological depth, that the church officially recognized them as a defining part of his legacy. These weren't ordinary nighttime visions. Don Bosco himself described them as journeys. Full, immersive, guided tours of the invisible world, and what he brought back from those journeys shook his students, his fellow priests, and ultimately the entire Catholic world to its core. Let's begin where he began, with Purgatory. Now, before you check out, hear me out, because the way Don Bosco described this place is nothing like the cold, abstract theological concept most people were handed in a Sunday school classroom. He didn't describe a courtroom. He didn't describe a waiting room. He described something far more personal, far more raw, and honestly, far more frightening because of how recognizable it is. The souls he encountered in these visions were fully conscious. They knew exactly who they were, they remembered their lives, they understood what was happening to them, and the sharpest part of their pain wasn't fire or darkness. It was longing. A desperate, bone-deep longing for God that could not yet be satisfied. Think about what that means for a moment. These were souls who were already saved. Heaven was guaranteed for them. But the habits of the heart they had carried through life, the small compromises, the attachments they never fully surrendered, the moments of selfishness they never fully repented of, those things had to be burned away before they could stand in the full radiance of divine glory. Don Bosco was emphatic about this. The suffering wasn't a punishment handed down by a distant judge. It was the natural consequence of loving imperfectly, and then encountering a love that is completely, overwhelmingly pure. It's like stepping out of a dark room into full noon sunlight. Your eyes don't adjust immediately. There's a process. And that process, for a soul still carrying the residue of sin, is genuinely painful. But here's what makes this so urgent for us, right now, today, living in the noise and the rush of the 21st century. Don Bosco didn't just report on Purgatory like a journalist filing a story from overseas. He came back from those visions and immediately called his young men together. He sat them down and he said, in effect, the choices you make this week, the small ones, the ones nobody sees, those choices are being written into your soul. They will follow you beyond the grave. He wanted them to understand that life is not a warm-up act. It is the event. Every single day is an unrepeatable opportunity to align your heart more fully with the heart of God, and every day you let pass without doing that is a gap you will eventually have to close, one way or another. Now let's talk about heaven, because this is where Don Bosco's descriptions go from sobering to absolutely breathtaking. The most striking thing about the way he talked about paradise isn't the beauty, though the beauty he described is staggering. It's the intimacy. He described a place where the light doesn't come from a star or a sun. It radiates from God Himself, and it doesn't just illuminate, it communicates. It carries love as a form of information. Every soul in that light doesn't just see God. They are seen by God completely, perfectly, without shame, without hiding, without the exhausting performance of trying to manage how others perceive you. Imagine experiencing that for the first time. Every mask you ever wore gone. And instead of terror at being exposed, you feel only the deepest relief you have ever known. He also spoke about the gardens of heaven, and I know that sounds almost quaint, like something off a greeting card, but the way he described them is anything but soft. The flowers he saw didn't just exist the way flowers exist here, in this temporary, fragile, always slightly dying way. They were saturated with a vitality that our world can only approximate. The colors he encountered were colors that don't have names in any human language, because those colors exist on a frequency that our physical eyes were simply not designed to process. He was quite honest about the inadequacy of human language to contain what he had witnessed. But he kept trying, because the point wasn't to give a perfect description. The point was to awaken a hunger. And then there were the reunions. This is the part that, if you've ever lost someone you love, will hit you the hardest. Don Bosco described meeting souls in heaven who recognized each other, not vaguely, not symbolically, but with the full force of authentic personal love, purified and elevated to something far beyond what we experience here. The bonds of friendship and family that were built on genuine virtue in this life, those bonds don't dissolve at death. They deepen. The love you feel for someone here, when it's rooted in something real, is actually a seed. What heaven does is remove everything that was limiting that love and allow it to bloom into its full, eternal form. Grief is real. Loss is real. But according to what Don Bosco brought back from those visions, it is also temporary in a way that the reunion is not. There is another dimension to his revelations that I don't want to skip over, because it is arguably the most comforting thing he ever communicated. Don Bosco was absolutely clear that the divide between the living and the dead is far thinner than we imagine. He described the saints and angels not as distant figures absorbed in some celestial activity that has nothing to do with us, but as active, attentive, intensely personal presences in our daily lives. They are aware of us. Not in a general, vague, cosmic background radiation kind of way. Specifically, individually. He described a kind of spiritual attention being paid to each human soul that is personalized in a way that should, if we truly grasped it, make us feel that we are never, under any circumstances, alone. Every prayer you pray reverberates in eternity. Every act of genuine charity, the inconvenient kind, the kind that costs you something, carries a weight in the heavenly realm that is completely disproportionate to how small it feels in the moment. Don Bosco saw this. He saw the way that a simple rosary prayed with real attention and real love could function like a lifeline for a soul in purgatory. He saw the way that offering up a small suffering, uniting it to Christ's passion, could release something spiritually. The Mass, above everything else, he described as the most powerful intervention available to us, an act of worship that crashes through the barrier between time and eternity, and operates simultaneously in both realms. This is why his message was never passive. He didn't come back from those visions and invite people to sit in quiet contemplation of beautiful theological truths. He came back with an assignment. He said, "You have tools. You have the Massachusetts. You have the rosary. You have acts of charity. You have the willingness to offer your daily sufferings instead of just resenting them. Use these tools, not just for your own spiritual growth, but for the souls who have already passed through death and are counting on the prayers of those still living." Because here is the extraordinary thing that Don Bosco understood and wanted us to understand. The Church is not divided at death. The living and the dead are still one body. We are still in relationship. We can still help each other. And when we do, when we pray for the dead, when we offer masses for them, when we carry their memory before God with real intention, something happens to us as well. Our own friendship with God deepens. Our own vision of eternity sharpens. Death starts to feel less like a wall closing in and more like a door being opened. The great fear of the unknown that haunts so many people, even many sincere believers, begins to dissolve, because eternity stops being a concept and starts becoming a destination you recognize. A place you've been preparing for. A home where someone who loves you infinitely is already waiting. That is the ultimate gift of Don Bosco's visions. Not just information about the afterlife. Not just consolation for grief, though they offer that abundantly. But a fundamental reorientation of how you see every single day. If heaven is real, and Don Bosco staked his entire life on the conviction that it is, then the most important thing happening right now is not what's in your inbox or on your schedule, or trending on social media. The most important thing happening right now is the slow, daily, often invisible work of becoming the kind of person who can walk through that door and feel, not like a stranger arriving in a foreign country, but like a child coming home. If this conversation stirred something in you, if it opened a question, or rekindled a hope, or made eternity feel a little more real, then you are exactly the person this channel exists for. Hit subscribe to Living Hope and make sure you never miss a video. We go deep on faith, on eternity, on the saints who mapped this territory before us, and on what it actually looks like to live with one eye on the life that doesn't end. Leave a comment below and tell me, what part of Don Bosco's visions hit you hardest? I read every single one. And I'll see you in the next video.